Hi, my name is Scott Robinson, and I will be speaking to you today about why the NCAA should not pay its athletes. First of all, student athletes are people who are talented enough in a sport to play at the collegiate level, and some may even go pro in their individual sport. The athletes many times come from difficult upbringings and sometimes were impoverished, so it's easy to understand why they would want money for their time. But in reality, the issue is that of the student athlete. These athletes are students first and athletes second. Even though they may spend more time a week on their sport, they still use the school to better their level of education. If players were to be paid, how would it be executed? How would the funds be distributed? If this was to happen, what effect would it have on the funding for many of these schools? These are all questions that need to be answered before we can commit to paying NCAA athletes. In this speech, I will tell you that student athletes are students above all. I will also tell you about how we can be sure that athletes are going to be paid fairly. And schools will lose money that they could put back into other projects around their academic institution. Student athletes are students first. This means that academics should be above all. Sadly, in most cases, this is just not true. Many times, athletes get involved in situations that get them into trouble. Of course, every young adult does stupid things, but how many more situations may arise if the athletes had money to throw around on frivolous things? Also, if they were to be paid, how would their academics fare? Would they even go to class? We don't know how student athletes would react to having newfound money like this. While in many cases we would probably only hear about the negative situations that would arise, of course, some athletes would probably use it the right way. But the issue is that the negative situations will always come out on top when it comes to publicity. And honestly, most schools don't want the negative publicity when it comes to their athletes. Another thing, student athletes would need to have certain parameters around their financials. Like they would actually have to attend class, get certain grades, etc. Just because there's no way to control them and keep them in line if they just say, hey, I have all this money, let me just skip class, participate in my sport, and I'll go pro in a year or two. If this was to go into effect, the real question is, how would it be executed? How would the compensation be broken down? How can we create a system to make it fair for all athletes? This is my biggest issue and a major issue in the conversation about college athletes being paid. How can you justify paying a little-known sports athlete the same amount as a star that's highly publicized? This is the main reason why I believe that it's not possible to pay NCAA athletes, on top of the fact that they are amateurs. But if you can't pay athletes fairly, then why pay them at all? Also, the issue of gender. Gender equality is a major issue going on right now, and realistically, how would you be able to pay fairly between the genders? This would cause more strife over the idea of compensation. And realistically, the main hurdle between paying the genders fairly is the gap between income and revenue from both men's athletics and women's athletics. Men's athletics makes much, much more a year in revenue than women's athletics does. In the end, it'll just end up becoming a battle over who can produce more on the court or on the field so that they can make more money when it comes down to compensation. And while that may stiffen competition a little bit, in the end it ruins the integrity of the sports itself. According to Money.com, the only way that we could pay college athletes is to replace their scholarships with the salary. So, in their example, they said, how about we pay a college player $100,000 a year? A full athletic scholarship in Division One universities is about $65,000 a year. Now, that's about $45,000 for tuition, $20,000 for room, board, and books. Now, the issue is that by making it a salary instead of a scholarship, the government has to tax that. Thus, according to Money.com, the student athlete would owe around $23,800 in federal income tax, $6,700 in state taxes, and a total of $30,500 in taxes. In certain cities, they levy an employee payroll tax. This could make more than $2,400 a year be paid in taxes. So, all in, after all the taxes and paying for things like Social Security, a player is left with $65,100. Since college bills come to $65,000, a player has $100 left. This is purely unrealistic, and most athletes will never be able to sustain themselves on $100. Many more have more money than that now. If student athletes are to be paid, this will affect the schools in many different ways. Another way will be the fact that they will lose a lot of money in revenue because they would have to pay the athletes out of their athletics revenue. For example, Texas, which is in the Big 12 Conference, made a total of $214,830,647. Their expenses on the year, though, were $207,022,323. The leftover money was allocated towards regular projects and other things that goes towards the school, such as funding scholarships, funding new buildings, etc. If athletes get paid, that money goes away very quickly, and most likely the schools will not turn a profit. Thus, some will even have to shutter if they are a private institution. For the reasons stated above, I believe that student athletes should not be paid. In the end, by paying student athletes, we will begin to see a decline in the sports themselves at the next level. We have already seen scandals like the college basketball scandal in which players were paid for their commitments to schools. This phenomenon will force the NCAA to change their minds in order to keep the best talent and product available to fans of all the sports of the NCAA.